So one of the themes I'm noticing here is the focus on brain health that is linking a number of us. So, as I talk about exercise, I'm going to be putting it in that brain health context, which is really one where health is not obviously the absence of disease, but really is about optimal functioning. And so, from a cognitive point of view, it's having our memory function as we would like it to function, to be able to make good decisions, good executive functions, regulate our emotions, to experience our emotions in appropriate levels, to move as we'd like to move, to have good balance, and all those sort of things. So exercise is one of those things that touches on a lot of those different things, and as I say, it fits fairly nicely into this theme of optimal functioning of the brain as a goal, really, for most of us. So first I'll talk about exercise in the context of other what are called modifiable or potentially modifiable lifestyle factors and their contributions to multiple, health in general, and also to the treatment of multiple diseases, some of them being brain diseases. And I say potential because it's very important to recognize that not all of us has the opportunity to sort of maximize each of these factors. We have to work with our own particular realities and opportunities. But the good news here is we'll see that adding as many as you can be beneficial. So just to some of the factors we've been looking at that can contribute to brain health, and it's a kind of growing list and expanding list, include things like diet. And diet, of course, plays a critical role in a number of diseases. Many of us are aware of the DASH diet. There's a particular diet called the MIND diet that is focused on promoting brain health. But they share a lot of commonalities. Some of the things that Michael Pollan, the author, talks about of eating real food, not too much, mostly plants, that sort of general theme. And that's a critical factor. But other things that are probably very familiar to people. So brain health, can be helped by avoiding smoking, getting good sleep. We had a talk yesterday on sleep. And then also a couple of factors that are very unique to the brain. So what we call cognitive stimulation is a very important one. So making sure that as much as you can, you have an environment where you're sort of constantly challenged throughout your life. You're constantly learning new things. Social stimulation, that is having as many relationships, meaningful relationships as possible, big social network. Those are also things, a factor that contributes to brain health. Even perhaps the size of our spatial environment. So having more interesting places to go is another factor. And all these things, as an aside, of course, are worrisome in COVID, where we've had a sort of, closing in on all those things, where many of our social relationships have become two-dimensional and we're stuck in one place a lot. But hopefully we'll be past that soon. Other factors we know are things like avoidance of head trauma, so traumatic brain injury, and prevention of hearing loss, stress, a reduction of stress. Mindfulness is shown to be beneficial. And then ultimately, the one I'm going to focus on today is exercise. What we generally know is of these factors, the more the better. So as many of them as you can do, you're going to benefit from. And our goal really is, for ideal functioning, is to, basically have the slowest rate of decline, keeping basically our brain functioning as we would like for as long as possible. So let me break down exercise very briefly into what I mean by that. So of course, exercise is multiple things. There's the cardiorespiratory part, the running on a treadmill or a brisk walk around the neighborhood. There's things, what we call strength training, so keeping our muscles well toned, and even things like balance and flexibility, or we need to have organized ways of maintaining those, and they all contribute together and may also have unique contributions. The Center for Disease Control has some guidelines for exercise that most of us aspire to, at least. They recommend at least 150 minutes of what we call sort of moderate intensity exercise, sort of a brisk walk around the neighborhood, not a stroll, a brisk walk, and trying to accumulate that number of minutes per week. They also recommend that if it's possible, that you do instead 75 minutes of a more higher intensity. So kind of a jogging or something that really gets your heart rate up, gets you sweating. 75 minutes of that is an ideal target. They've also, of course, having growing awareness that activity in and of itself is very important. Just getting up and moving around. They have a suggestion of 300 minutes, but also just really getting up and moving around regularly may, within each hour may have a benefit. And it may be that these are working through different mechanisms to be beneficial, but we're becoming growingly concerned about the amount of sitting we do. And again, especially in the COVID environment where many of us work all day from Zoom call to Zoom call or spend a lot of time, these are things we have to consider. The benefits of exercise, as I say, are both for general brain health, but there's also growing literatures, and my focus is on Alzheimer's disease in particular, but we've been finding that exercise is a critical potential preventative as well as treatment in other neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease, very useful along with for treating anxiety and depression and addiction, some of the things Dr. Brewer just mentioned, and many others. So as I say, it's there's both a general promotion of keeping your brain doing what you want to be able to do with it, but also as specific prevention and treatment approaches for multiple diseases. And finally, I won't go into mechanisms, but I just wanted to, because these may come up in the questions, that some of the questions we're interested in are, what kinds of exercise matter, how much and how intense it has to be, whether the patterning matters, are we sitting too much, how factors interact, and also individual differences like individual genetics and sociocultural factors also play a key role. So that's my sort of quick introduction. I'm happy to take questions now and talk a little bit more about anything anyone's interested in.
Yeah.
Great. So I have a question, and it's an experience that I had with a patient that was a long distance runner. And she was able to run really far, but eventually she developed problems with her bones and with her joints and couldn't run anymore, and found herself in real difficulty dealing with life because she couldn't run anymore. So somehow the exercise created an addiction on her that now was not being satisfied by anything. What's your experience with those kinds of responses to excessive exercise?
Yeah, well, it's great. It's a great problem, and it's interesting. It hits on a lot of different things. I'm not a clinician, so I haven't actually worked with anybody in that specific context. But it's very clear that sort of patterning of exercise can often be both helpful. And it may be that if you said long distance runner, it may be there's also an interesting question in the field about, is there potentially too much exercise, especially if it tends to take away time from other things that also may be helping coping. So it could have been a situation like that. Of course, if I were a clinician, I'd probably be working with that person to try to especially if they're interested in maintaining the fitness and the brain health and such, to find substitute ways of remaining active, but that it can be quite a challenge, especially if someone has, if spending hours and hours and hours and hours in a week exercising. It may be, again, driven by performance goals, which is important, and an important distinction from brain health goals, which clearly, if you again look to the CDC guidelines, is very a different problem than someone who has, goals for competition or that sort of thing, as opposed to goals of just generally being more helpful, more healthy. Excuse me.
I have a question that I had, and it looks like a couple of people have the same question. So I'm just going to read it from one of the audience perspective. Sure. Is all exercise good for the brain, or does cardio have different brain benefits from strength training or something like yoga, right? So you mentioned the list, you mentioned cardio, balance, strength. I'll add flexibility to that one because I'm a dancer. So what are the benefits of each of these different types of exercise?
That's a great question. So of course, the cardiorespiratory has that unique ability to expand our ability to, basically the health of the vascular system. The brain, as we know, is a huge consumer of oxygen and glucose. It has a special protective barrier, kind of barrier they call the blood-brain barrier. So basically, anything keeps that vasculature healthy, like cardiovascular exercise is just tremendous for that. And there's a suggestion in the literature that, prevention of Alzheimer's disease by staying very active with cardiorespiratory exercise in particular may reduce our risk 40 or 50%. So that's pretty profound if one keeps it going through life. The other, though, the CDC recommends also that you do two days at least of strength training, and that's an awareness that and it may have its own unique benefits as well. There's a growing awareness of what are called myokines, that muscles are also sort of signaling the brain and releasing chemicals that sort of give updates on its status, that are part of neuroinflammation. And neuroinflammation is an issue here that exercise is also beneficial for, but it's something we try to keep minimized, and that contributes to brain unhealth. So if I invented that word, I guess, but misapplied it. But so there's right now, it's probably safe to say also from a functional perspective, and the sort of, as I say, psychosocial components, that being able to do what we want to do, which involves both having the endurance to do it, but also the strength, the balance. And so yoga can contribute to the flexibility. It's a complete package. So it's probably safest to recommend that as much as you can, you be aware of doing all of them. But as I say, the cardiorespiratory has a potential, a lot of firepower for really helping the brain.
And that's probably the one that we understand the most, right, at a molecular level. In terms of, I mean, when you mentioned blood-brain barrier, the first thing that I thought was medications, right? Because we do know that people who are active physically, and undergo surgery, for instance, and have a medication, that medication tends to work better. So I don't know if that's part of your expertise, but do you know if that is related to the blood-brain barrier access to those drugs?
Well, yes. So the main thing we want is an intact blood-brain barrier, because it keeps things that shouldn't be in the brain out, and gets things that we want out of the brain out. So it's very important, as I say, and having that, so and medications, that becomes another issue. If the medications sometimes are designed to work outside the body and they shouldn't be in, so that can be a factor. But as I say, I think generally we know that a healthy blood-brain barrier, which again is contributing to a lot of different factors, contribute to that, is very important. And exercise can be an important component in maintaining that health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of that myself when, we got a treadmill this year for Christmas, but I don't have time, right? So I always think, okay, should I do 20 minutes of running really, 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 really fast, and then at the end, I can't breathe, or should I just do some, gentle yoga and strengthening? And so now I think I'm going to go for the running, and maybe change it up different days a week.
A lot of it's your own personal preference, but there's right now, one of the questions in the literature is the value of high intensity interval training, which has been shown to reproduce many of the same sort of benefits in terms of fitness, generating fitness. It's obviously much more compact in terms of time, but isn't everyone's cup of tea because it hurts. So but you can be very efficient in terms of versus spending a much greater amount of time at a moderate intensity, what's called moderate intensity continuous training. And right now the basic takeaway is we don't know whether one is clearly superior in terms of brain health. That's kind of the studies we're doing in our lab. But right now, I would probably say just do whatever it fits you best and you can maintain within your schedule. And
it's great for my brain. It's great for my brain because, when I tried to accommodate an hour of exercise, I never could do it. And then I would feel guilty. Now I do this high intensity training for 15 minutes. You do 2 minutes on, 1 minute off. Rest. I mean, with one little thing that I just shake around, and my God, I mean, it feels great. I can do it every day, and 15 minutes is just very, very simple and easy, and I feel so much better.
Yeah, exactly. You're a perfect fit for that. Then you come away feeling the accomplishment, and that's an important part.
Exactly. Otherwise, it's just a chore that you fail to carry out if you try to do too much. Like an hour or an hour and a half of exercise in the middle of the day. So it really is. I found it just absolutely. Very, very satisfying. And that actually makes you look forward to it as opposed to looking at exercise as something that, I got to go do exercise. No, it's going to be 15 minutes. I can do that.
Right.
We
But an
have
important takeaway message. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I say we have a related but sort of opposite question, for people who do have limited physical mobility, who might have a bad knee or some sort of movement impediment, what are the ways that they can make sure that they get in their 150 minutes? Is it per week? Actually, I meant to ask.
Per week.
Per week. Okay. Not per day.
No, not per day. Yeah, per day. Well, that's what I was about to say. It's important to have the takeaway message being really that any is better than none. That's very clear, and that if you have some mobility issues or and also intensity is relative to where you start from. So that's a very important thing. So again, there's different ways of monitoring, and I won't get into that, but really the idea of whatever you can do is good. It's nice to have a target like 150 minutes, and again, if you can only stroll, then stroll. If it even is just if you're getting up and moving around for 5 minutes per hour, there are definitely benefits. What we clearly know is that sitting all the time doing nothing is bad. It doesn't mean it's a terrible. It just means you're not going to have those benefits of the exercise. And again,
and I think changing it up also helps. Doing
Yes.
one thing one day, another thing another. I do 3 different sets of workouts that are completely different and target different parts of the body, but I can do it because I don't get bored.
Yeah, that's important.
I have one last question that I probably shouldn't ask in the interest of time, but I will anyway, because I like sneaking in neuroscience into these health talks. So if you had to tell people who aren't neuroscientists 1 or 2 areas of the brain that benefit specifically from exercise, what would those areas be and what are their functions?
Yeah, so one of the key areas is the hippocampus, which I think was just
I was hoping you said
Loves
that.
the hippocampus.
You know,
What can I say?
critical strong structure and some of the mechanisms that are the positive mechanisms that exercising generally increases is hippocampal function. It's both what's called a process called neurogenesis. So hippocampus tends to generate new neurons, new nerve cells, and exercise does that. What's called synaptogenesis, so more connections between those neurons, and then another process called angiogenesis. So the ability to have new capillaries and such feeding more blood and nutrients to the brain cells. That's one of the areas where those 3 processes are really, really critical for maintaining cognitive functions such as short-term memory and such that the hippocampus is a critical component to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like my brain has so many more connections now just listening to all this stuff. Talk
Because
about
exercise your hands.
That's right. So thank you very much for your presentation.